It's Monday night, and you know what that means. It's time for the latest edition of Real Talk, now in partnership with Jersey First. You can check out all of their excellent content by going to www.jerseyfirst.org. And certainly make sure you like them on Facebook and, of course, like them on both Instagram and Twitter. I can't say how proud I am to be joining the Jersey First family. And, of course, a great way to start the month of February with them here. And certainly, you know who I am. I am New Jersey's premier journalist, top 100 Latino via the Latino Spirit Online magazine, and certainly the sworn enemy of all the latte liberals, social justice clowns. It's sort of, all the woke fools, toxic progressives, all the climate hysterics. Of course, it's me, Fernando Uribe, staying up against all of them each and every week here on Real Talk. And so I want to thank you all for joining us here from wherever and however you may be watching here on the 7th of February via Facebook Live on StreamYard and also now on the Jersey First YouTube channel. Folks, I can't say enough again really about how excited I am to be a part of the Jersey First family. And of course, Real Talk continues to bring you the exclusives that nobody else brings you in New Jersey media. And without a doubt, of course, I want to be able to give a shout out to my alma mater, my Rutgers men's basketball team, with a big win over the weekend against Michigan State, certainly making their case for March Madness and the NCAA tournament, of course, in the Big Ten. And we'll see if they're dancing away in the month of March. But right now, folks, as you know, politics never takes a break here. And of course, joining me this week is renowned political consultant and Republican strategist Chris Russell. Joins us here tonight on Real Talk. Chris, welcome.
Thank you, Fernando. Thanks for having me. And next time you have me on, if you want to talk about March Madness, I could do 20 minutes on that anytime. So let me know.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm excited. Obviously, Rutgers men's basketball kind of in a good position again. We'll see, how the rest of the Big Ten schedule works out for them.
Yeah.
In the next few weeks, obviously approaching March Madness, which is right around the corner. Chris, how are you? Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year as well. I'm doing well. Thank you.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. And, Chris, let's sort of start off by saying, listen, I respect your work. I know that you are one of the more renowned political consultants in the state, obviously Republican strategist, as I just described. Before we get into any campaigns that you're working on in 2022, let's sort of go back a little bit to 2021.
Yeah.
And I was one of the very few journalists that called this race closely. I said this was going to be a 3-point win. Again, I'm not trying to be mean or anything, but again, because of sort of the dynamics that I knew that were in place, sort of like the 1 million+ registration advantage that Democrats had in the state, the fact that a lot of counting machines, I don't mean the machines themselves, but the apparatuses like the parties,
right,
really do a good job of mobilizing whether we like it or not. And I felt that because of that, and again, mind you, I was rooting for Jack. Let's not get it twisted. But I kind of had this feeling that I'm like, you know what? I think Governor Murphy is going to squeak it out somehow because of these variables I just described. Looking back, obviously, you've had a couple months to sort of process. I know you're working other campaigns now. What could have gone better in 2021 with such a razor-thin margin this past November?
So a couple of things. Yeah. I mean, listen, anytime you get close to pulling something like that off, it's tougher than sometimes if you would have lost a race by 10 or 15 points. Right. And we knew it was close internally as well. I mean, our numbers, and I'll give credit to Adam Geller, who was our pollster, was very spot on, where the public polling, like the Monmouth poll and others, just were way off. They never had the race. They never figured out that this isn't 2017 and 2018 anymore. It's a different time, and that the political environment has shifted, and they didn't take that into account. I think, ultimately I look at a few things. One, you hit on the demographics of the state, which we all know. I mean, this is a 1.1 million more Democrats. That has grown by about 450,000 since last time when Chris Christie won in 2009. It was, so we've moved a lot more to become more of a Democratic state on paper. But for us, we knew that we had to kind of unite the Republican base, which is a challenging thing these days. You have kind of I like to look at it as 3 different bases in some ways, right? You have the traditional Reagan conservative, the pro-life, pro-2A conservative. You have the Trump the Trump supporter, the Trump base, the Trump conservative, who he's brought a lot of blue collar folks into the party. If you see, Steve Sweeney can attest to that firsthand, right? About kind of the shift of where South Jersey went, big wins in Salem and Cumberland and Gloucester, Atlantic, places that have been purple or even blue as recently as 4 or 5 years ago. And then there's the other part of the party, which is maybe, let's call it the old Christie Whitman part of the party, right? Which I would, and I've been a friend, and I consider myself a friend of John Bramnick for a long time. He represents a little bit more of a liberal part of the party. All these groups have to be together for us to be successful in New Jersey. They all might not love the candidate when we have a statewide thing, but they have to love them enough to get behind them. And I think so. We worked hard to unite those three groups, which is a challenge. And I thought Jack did a really strong job of trying to give everybody a seat at the table, which means no one was fully satisfied. And then reach out to the independents and Democrats in the state. The independents are a huge number still. There are about as many independents or unaffiliated voters as Democrats in the state. Republicans have to win them big to win an election here, probably by about 30 points. And then you need about twice as many Democrats voting for the Republican than Republicans who might vote for the Democrat. If you do that, you can put yourself in position. And we got close, but we fell short. And I'm happy to get into some of the reasons why I think that happened. But sure. That's the challenge that you're laid out here. 13-point Biden won the state by 13 or 16 points. That's where we started. He only won Virginia by 10. So we're about 6 points worse than Virginia, just as the average goes.
No, Chris, great breakdown there. And again, and just for our audience at home that wasn't really familiar with the numbers per se, the final tabulation here, we're looking at 1,339,471 votes for Phil Murphy and 1,255,185 for Jack Cherry. Again, 3 percentage points, very, very close. We saw, Jack made a lot of gains in counties where, case in point, where I live here in Hudson County, predominantly a very blue county, sort of middle of the road, maybe kind of blue collar Democrats, not like the woke fools that I like to reference, like, the AOCs of the world, God help us, out, across the river in New York, but kind of like, blue collar, lifelong Democrats. And even that, Phil Murphy still only had about maybe, almost 80%, which you might say, well, that's a lot for him. Yeah, but normally Democrats win Hudson County by 90, 95%. That wasn't the case. Jack was able to make some inroads in Hudson, in Bergen, in Passaic, obviously, in other parts of the state I'm looking at here. When we look at
County Republicans picking up their first countywide Republican seat in Passaic since Kristen Corrado.
Yes, exactly. Absolutely. So Jack at the top of the ticket did help, again, a lot of people down the ballot. I mean, there's no question about that. And we sort of look back, again, I don't want to Monday morning quarterback this, Chris, because I'm sure you've heard all the chirping and everything. But I'll make the case that in the final weeks, or maybe the last 6 weeks, I know Jack came out strong. A lot of door-to-door stuff. The ads were, hitting the governor hard, and rightfully so. Listen, I'm a homeowner. And I'm the only conservative, and I'm the only journalist really that talks about this in media consistently. I pay almost $10,000 in property taxes, for my home. There are a lot of Democrats, much to the left in Trenton, that have never met a tax that they don't like. We keep seeing the gas tax maybe going up again. Tolls, the fact that spending's out of control in Trenton. These are all things that we know, and I think that it resonated with people that were upset about the pandemic, that were upset that the governor took this sort of, one-size-fits-all approach to New Jersey when that should not have been the case, right? Yep. I've had the privilege of traveling to the great state of Texas and the great state of Florida, two freedom-loving states that handled COVID differently, and we all saw that those governors got it right. Today, obviously, the governor announcing that mask mandates in our schools will be ending on March the 7th. I think that's still too long away. Should have been sooner. But the point is that I think a lot of people in New Jersey were sort of galvanized by Jack's campaign in sort of the weeks leading up to it. Maybe the Project Veritas video had a little something to do with that. Again, and irrespective of what we think about, James O'Keefe, a fellow Rutgers alum, we know that video got people's attention. And also, too, Jack was able to get a lot of people that were just upset at the governor and got him out to the polls. Is that a good assessment of the way I'm sort of breaking down this race, too?
I think so. Listen, the good part of this, if you look at Republican enthusiasm in the state, back in 2017, Republican enthusiasm was pretty flat. For Republicans to win in this state, given how we are outnumbered, we obviously have to turn out a higher percentage of our party members than they have to turn out of theirs. And a higher percentage of unaffiliated voters also help us. So in about 2017 and 2018, on election day, the electorate in the state was about plus 17, plus 18 Democrat on election day. Obviously, we had very tough years in 2017 and 2018 as Republicans, congressionally and otherwise, in the gubernatorial race. This past year, that number was down to about 11.5 on election day. That's because Republican turnout was up. We, party to party, about a 10-point edge in intensity, and a higher turnout of unaffiliateds. It wasn't enough. And the interesting thing where I think we need to do some examining and be, I want to put it out there to your audience and to you too, since I know you follow this stuff. If you look back at where, I like to compare the race, and I did all along at some level, to the Christie 09 race. What was their path? How did they win? Obviously, the state has changed. The environment has changed politically. Some counties have become more red or less red. But we really did well in the reddest counties in the state, which ironic in some ways, because Jack was viewed, I think, more as a moderate or at least, not all the way, not a Mike Doherty, right? Not a Jay Weber type of conservative, but someone more towards the middle. He did very well. Ocean County, where I live, 68% of the vote in Ocean County. That's higher than Chris Christie got. Go to a place like Cape May, we did very well. Sussex, Warren, where we struggled in that number, which is, I think, where we need to figure out as Republicans how we're going to bridge this gap. Our numbers were off in Somerset. We did worse than Christie in Somerset. We did worse than Christie in Morris. Morris is for New Jersey to be a Republican county statewide again. Morris County needs to do better than a 10-point win. I brought up a stat, and I don't want to go too kind of political nerd on you, but if you look at the comparison between Gloucester and Morris, right? Gloucester County has 28,000 more Democrats than Republicans on registration. 28,000 more Democrats than Republicans in Gloucester. Morris has 18,000 more Republicans than Democrats, right? So it's clearly one county on paper is a lot more Republican. On election day, Jack won each of those counties by about the same amount, by about 10 or 11 points. It tells you that the culturally conservative kind of Democrat independent in Gloucester came out, and that's what really sunk Steve Sweeney as well, and voted for Jack. Whereas up in Morris, Governor Murphy was able to kind of still hang on to this vestige of that upper middle class, affluent, well-educated white voter in a lot of ways who was kind of moved away from the party during the Trump years and hasn't quite come all the way back. And the question or the challenge for us is how do you unite those people? How do you unite people like in my hometown of Jackson, where we ran up a huge margin, right? And then go get the Republican who used to vote that way in Summit and Westfield and Mendham and places like that. It's an interesting dynamic, and for Republicans to win, these congressional races this year, and we all know we got screwed on the map a few weeks ago, and I know the new maps came out for legislators today, and I haven't had a chance to look at them closely. We've got to figure out how to unite that party and then have a message that keeps everyone together and then reaches out to those independents and Democrats. And I think, the criticism I've heard of Jack's campaign, and I'm open all ears, right? I mean, winning is all that matters in this thing. I thought we did a good job. I thought we set the right path that people should follow and build upon. But the question was, were we too much economic and fiscal? Were we too much property taxes? Should there have been more culture war stuff? And I know Jack talked about a lot of that stuff. He talked about masks. He talked about the vaccines. He talked about school choice. But our advertising was focused largely on economic and fiscal issues. The one challenge about that, which a lot of people who are, observers that don't follow as keenly as we do, we spent about the same money as Phil Murphy campaign to campaign. We were both in the state matching program. So about $16 million each was spent and raised and spent by the campaigns. The outside groups, so Democratic groups or liberal groups, woke groups, frankly, from outside New Jersey, spent $24 million on behalf of Governor Murphy in attacking Jack Ciattarelli. Republican groups, in contrast, spent only $4 million. So while the campaigns were even in terms of spending, we were outspent by about $20 million on the outside. And as you know, living where you live, the heart of the New York media market, right, is very expensive to run ads in New York and Philadelphia. We felt we had to make a choice between two different paths and hope we got help from the outside. And so I've had some really good conversations with people who see it differently than what our strategy was, and I'm all for that. That's what this is about, right? We want to figure out as Republicans how to win and go from 51-48 loss to 50-49 win, right? That's the goal.
Sure. No, Chris, great breakdown. And folks, if you're just joining us right now, it is 6:15 here on the East Coast. And this week on Real Talk, with a new partnership with Jersey First, Chris Russell, renowned political consultant and Republican strategist, here joining us on the latest edition of Real Talk with Fernando Uribe. Chris, real quick here, I don't want to dwell too much on this. I want to sort of get into 2022 a little bit in your campaigns you're working on presently. But, just 5 hours south to Virginia, some of those culture war topics were working. And I think that that's sort of going to be a segue into what we're going to see in 2022. And I had David Perano on just a couple of weeks ago. And I talked with him at length and said, listen, for Democrats who, have to be sort of, breathing a sigh of relief, right? Obviously, election day took a little bit longer to confirm, obviously, than that Tuesday night in Asbury Park. But by Thursday evening, they were breathing a little bit of a sigh of relief. It should have been a teaching moment, I would argue, for Democrats throughout the state. Maybe not the sort of, middle of the road Democrats, but for whatever reason, whether it's the statewide party or county by county, district by district, listen, if you want to acquiesce to some of this woke nonsense, and again, I don't care how this sounds, because I've learned just not to have a filter on the show. When it comes to what's going on right now, I don't care about pronouns. I don't care about bathrooms. I don't care about all this woke nonsense, because at the end of the day, what people care about is, hey, how much more is it costing me to fill up my gas tank, to take my kids to school, to take my kids to soccer practice, to go grocery shopping? Do I have to pay more in tolls? Supply chain issues, inflation. That's what's going to matter to people. Again, nothing against, some of these social causes, but at the end of the day, New Jersey's a state which is, there are pockets that are very red and there are pockets that are very blue. And then you have like the rest of the state that's sort of in the middle a little bit. And, again, and I said this to David Perano and other Democrats that I've interviewed since November. If you want to die on a hill on all of these, all this social justice nonsense and woke stupidity, do so at your own peril, but it's going to cost you seats. And historically, as we move into 2022, Chris, historically, the opposing party tends to win the House during a midterm. We saw it during the George W. Bush administration in 2002. We saw it during the Clinton years, obviously. We saw it going back to, other years. But the 2 years I can remember that, the incumbent party kept the House and actually gained seats was in 2002 under Republicans, and then in 1934 under FDR. Normally, that's not the case. And I think that this is a prime opportunity for Republicans, whether you're center-right, center, whatever, to win seats this year. And, if Democrats want to, be all woke and everything, God bless you. We saw what happened in Virginia. You start messing with parents and their kids and masks and all of this COVID nonsense. Not to say it's not nonsense, and we know it's serious. Yep. But at the end of the day, the way that the states have been governed because of COVID, you want to go on that, you want to run on that platform, God bless you, you're going to lose big. And I think even someone like David Perano saw it, and other Democrats I've interviewed, they're looking at this as a moment that, they better get their, what together.
I think it's a really good point. Listen, when we started the campaign last year, and I know we want to move to 22, Governor Murphy was still ranking pretty high on his approval ratings surrounding COVID, was kind of been given a pass, that it was difficult and it was unprecedented, and kind of people generally rally around their leaders in that regard. As the campaign went on, you saw that him start to hemorrhage that support, right? People, and I think where we are today, had the 2021 election been held today, I think it may have been a different result, because I think it's even moved further since November to where we are now. We've now passed, Omicron and all that. So I 100% agree with you on that. And I think, I would tell you that woke nonsense has already claimed people. The Democratic Party in South Jersey, which 4 years ago was considered this juggernaut that could not be defeated, was nearly wiped out. In a big swath of the county. The Senate president, unprecedented, right, losing his reelection. And I think you look at a guy like Senator Gopal. It is no mistake that this past week, and if you guys caught it, Senator Gopal decided that he would co-sponsor legislation to end these emergency executive orders with Declan O'Scanlan. You know why? Because he's gonna lose his seat if he doesn't get it. He lost his two running mates. He barely hung on. So I'm with you. The more the Democrats want to fight wars on, defunding the police or masking kids in schools, they're going to lose.
Real quick, and I'll let you finish. My apologies. I mean, I had Senator Gopal on the show just a couple weeks ago, and I really respected his level of self-awareness because you could tell that his race was razor thin. He lost two assembly running mates. Obviously, he's the only Democrat legislator along the Jersey shoreline, really from, I think, Tom's River down to Cape May. So I think that was a teachable moment for State Senator Gopal. And even he admitted it. He was like, listen, as a Democrat, I mean, he identifies as a progressive, but at the end of the day, he's not like, he's not the Puerto Rican princess. He's not, an anti-Semite like Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib. He's not one of the part of the woke party that, is all about cancel culture and all about, again, all this woke nonsense that, dooms Democrats, especially those in the middle, that they want to keep their seats. And, to your point, again, it's one of those things where I think people are starting to wake up. We're seeing approval ratings for the president sink, disappear quicker than the Mets during October. It's really crazy where people, I think, are starting to wake up a little bit. And that popularity you mentioned that the governor enjoyed on, let's say, Halloween, that's not the case as we approach Valentine's Day. I'll let you finish. I'm sorry.
100%. Listen, Senator Gopal, I know him a little bit. I like Vin, actually. But I think he was, to me, he's the guy who's the last one to survive that wave. He just escaped it in his district. And I think, listen, to your point, he identifies as a progressive. That's fine. I think in his heart of hearts, he's a pragmatist. But he let, his party, and if he wants to be a leader in that party, he's got to speak up more that you guys are taking us the wrong direction. So like you're talking about Democrats who are getting it. I'm not sure someone like Phil Murphy gets it. And I'm not sure some of these other Democrats down in Washington, D.C. get it. So if they want to go down that hill, let them go down that hill. I think guys like Vin Gopal do get it, and he's going to try and save himself for the next couple of years. But for Republicans, we need to press that advantage, right? We had a great election day in the southern part of the state, creeping up in the central Jersey. We can take that more if they want to push this far left narrative. This is not a far left state. It might be a Democratic state, but it's not a radical liberal state. And we as Republicans need to understand that and get to the middle and bring some of these kind of centrists or practical, pragmatic people over to us.
You're absolutely right. Listen, New Jersey is not a dump like Vermont, okay, where it keeps electing like two.
It's beautiful up there, though.
What's that?
It's beautiful up there to go hiking.
No, it's great, but I mean, right. you have to kind of question the political IQ of voters there, where they keep electing two god awful. One's a socialist, one other guy. The only thing he's good at is maybe making a cameo appearance in a DC movie, and that's it. It's really alarming. But Chris, to your point here, I mean, again, we move into 2022, and we know that again. Listen, I'm not trying to sort of sound apocalyptic here, but up here in Hudson where I live, I'll be interviewing Robert Menendez Jr. in a few weeks. Somewhere like here up in 8th Congressional District, it's pretty safe, unless something catastrophic happens, a Democrat will win that seat again. Probably the same thing with Bill Pascrell's seat. Probably the same thing with Josh Gottheimer up in Bergen County. But down in Central and South Jersey, that's not the case. I think there are a lot of vulnerable Democrats running this year for re-election for their House seats respectively. And I think they're very vulnerable. I think as you alluded to, we mentioned about South Jersey. I had the privilege of being one of the few journalists, if at all, to interview at the time State Senator-elect Durr on a podcast. And he was very transparent about what got him the win. And a shout out to Steve Cush, obviously, the operative working with his campaign. But in this year, though, Chris, I mean, I would argue that Central and South Jersey Democrats are very vulnerable. They want to keep their base, but at the same time, if they don't acquiesce a little bit to the woke crowd within the party, they might lose votes or lose progressive voters. Where do you see Democrats most vulnerable right now? Again, I'm assuming you're working on a campaign, so feel free to share that with us.
And I'll disclose, I'm a homer in District 3 and District 5. I'm working with Bob Healy Jr. in District 3 and Nick DiGregorio in District 5. And listen, there are other good candidates, out there around the state. So, but I'll go to bat for my guys in terms of those two districts. District 3 and 5, the Democrats, like I said, in this map that they gerrymandered the heck out of, right? That Judge Wallace clearly in the tank for the Democrats to get the map they got. They took districts that I can tell you, Jack Ciattarelli last year won 6 of the 12 congressional districts in the state as they were currently configured. Jack Ciattarelli won 6 out of 12. We held 2. He won 6. They gerrymandered that map where now only 3 of the 12 Ciattarelli won. However, District 3, Ciattarelli lost by 1 point. District 5, he lost by 1 point. District 11, I think he lost by 4 points. These are places that Joe Biden won very sizable double-digit margin victories, 2 years prior. So it tells you those districts, despite the gerrymander, despite the Democrats trying to rig this map for the next 10 years, those races, 7 is a very good pickup opportunity for Tom Kean and the other candidates. Again, I won't even pick sides, right? 3 is an opportunity, 5 is an opportunity, 11 is an opportunity. I think someone like Frank Pallone, potentially, to your point, in that same Gopal area, right, could face a race that he hasn't faced in a long time. Congressman Van Drew is going to win easily. Chris Smith is going to likely, if he wins his primary, he'll win easily. Where we need to go next is these districts 3, 5, 7, 11, even 6. Opportunity for us there. Jack was very close, competitive in a midterm year, as you point out. The wind should be at our back. Joe Biden's numbers are terrible. And as Republicans, we need to keep the focus on Joe Biden and keep the focus on the failure of Democrats in Washington who've taken the party to a place, as we said a lot in the South Jersey races, this isn't John F. Kennedy's Democratic Party anymore, right? No. It's not even Bill Clinton and Al Gore's Democratic Party. This party has come way, way left, and they're out of step. And as Republicans, we got to hold our feet to the fire.
Chris, well said there. Let me ask you, because you did mention a couple of districts, and I know one campaign you're working on. Yep. Got to ask you because he'll be on. He's been on before with me. He'll be back on later in the spring. I know. Listen, I'm happy to have your candidate on as well. Yep. So obviously off the air, reach out to me. I'm happy to make time for every candidate that I can. Listen, 3 is very interesting, and the reason I think that I'm going to talk about it is because we know that there's been a lot of mainstream attention brought to that district. Obviously, Andy Kim, as an incumbent, is one of those that has fundraised very well. Yeah. I don't want to call him a moderate Democrat. I think he leans left on a lot of things, which concerns me as someone who's a pretty, center-right guy, but more fiscal conservative. In that district, though, during that primary, we know that Ian Smith, the gym owner of the Attila's gym owner down in Belmar, not to be confused with Belmar down the Jersey Shore, but Belmar down in South Jersey, announces candidacy. We know that he's been a media darling for many, many months, if not more than a year. He's been on Tucker Carlson. He's been with Sean Hannity on Fox News. He's been on Newsmax. He's led rallies. Irrespective of, some things that Ian has come clean about, some transgressions he's, obviously, I'm sure are going to get harped on during this campaign. What separates your candidate from someone like Ian Smith or other Republicans that are going to be running hard on mask mandates, how COVID ravaged the state, what Democrats have enabled in New Jersey for some time? What can you tell us about Mr. Healy maybe separating himself from the other candidates in the field in his quest to win the Republican primary?
Yeah, I think you'll find out as the campaign develops that Bob is a pretty conservative, libertarian-leaning, even in some ways, kind of candidate. He's a successful, business owner in South Jersey. He's been the family's very successful yacht building company, Viking Yacht, employed about 1,600 people in southern New Jersey and central, however, depending you want to classify central and southern. He's got a record of philanthropy, which is really impressive. And he's talked about openly that when he was a college kid, he was kind of angry at the world, kind of spoiled guy who didn't know what he was going to do. He started a punk band. He was out touring on a punk band. He came back to the family business, and his father said, before you come to the business, I want you to do philanthropy. And Bob actually went out to Sierra Leone, West Africa, and with the family foundation, built hospitals, built schools, learned kind of that there's people out there who aren't as privileged as the rest of us and need help. And Bob kind of, I think it changed his heart in a way about who he was. I think he brings that kind of balance of conservative, but someone who's got a track record of giving back to people and being someone who's can appeal to a broader spectrum of folks. And again, listen, on the Ian Smith side, my point, and I made it the other day, I just don't think, there are certain things in politics that, we have to realize, especially in districts that tilt towards one party or another. And in this case, again, Joe Biden won this district by 13, 14 points. This is not a slam dunk Republican district like a Smith district or something like that. I unfortunately for Mr. Smith, I think the DUI, the vehicular homicide in his past, which he has come clean on, that's a very tough thing to get over the top of. The other piece of it was, which has kind of more come to light recently, and he hasn't backed off of it, was kind of suggesting that 9/11 was a hoax, an inside job, right? A government-sponsored attack on the World Trade Center. In Monmouth County, which I know you guys up there were devastated by what happened on 9/11. You could see the smoke from where you live, I'm sure.
Every day, every
Right?
day, Chris. Every day I look at the sky.
But Monmouth County, you may know, Middletown was kind of the outside in New Jersey, lost 37 people in Middletown alone, 150 people in Monmouth County. Still touches those people in a very direct way. In fact, she's okay with me talking about this. The campaign manager for Bob, Teresa Velarde, she lost her father in 9/11 when she was 6. It's a personal issue to a lot of these folks. And I just don't think someone who is that fringy as Ian is on some of this stuff can relate to voters in the middle who's going to have to win in this race. Again, I don't know the man well, but I think we need to nominate the most electable candidates who are conservatives who can win. I think Bob Healy is that. I think over the course of the next few months, that's what campaigns are about, right? He'll have to prove that. But I think there's some things where we have to realize that, there's some things that you're probably not going to be able to overcome in a general election. And we need to put forth, especially this year, the best candidate to win, because we have an opportunity to take these seats back and we shouldn't squander it.
No, fair enough, Chris. And that's a great observation, especially, again, as we all know historically how midterm elections do tend to fare. Folks, it's 6:32 here on the East Coast. And joining me here tonight on Real Talk in partnership with Jersey First is Republican strategist Chris Russell. Chris, is there a way for Republicans statewide to sort of do that delicate balancing act of sort of harping on the obvious, right? Fiscal issues, which we all know Democrats right now are a disaster on. Spending's out of control. There are people within the party now jumping ship on Build Back Better. I haven't seen anything being built. I haven't seen anything back. I haven't seen anything better. So that has to be one of the most asinine acronyms I've ever heard for a piece of legislation. But let me not get started on that. Again, that's the academic in me. But the journalist in me has to ask, is there a way for Republicans? Again, your campaign, I'm sure you're strategizing with, the NJGOP, which I've had some issues with in the last year or so in the way of messaging. But aside from just the obvious, it's easy to just harp on highest property taxes, spending, acquiescing to like the radical part of the party. But is it possible to sort of, do that balancing act? Can you run on the culture war issues and also the economic issues and win? Or does it really have to be one or the other, depending on the district?
Listen, I think in these districts that we just talked about, the ones that we are facing challengers, like where we're trying to defeat Andy Kim or Josh Gottheimer or Mikey Sherrill, it has to be both, right? We have to find a way to mobilize both those people. So I think part of it isn't, and this was, I think, something that, President Trump, did a lot of great things in office, right? In terms of the policies and the economic policies. All these things that were successful. I think the one thing he struggled with is how to talk to people, how to frame the messages to some folks. And I think you saw that kind of alienate, particularly here in a state like New Jersey, alienated some of these suburban voters who decided that they were going to vote for someone like Joe Biden, who's frankly a terrible candidate, right?
Disaster.
They picked him. They didn't vote for Joe Biden. They voted against Donald Trump, right? So I think what we as Republicans need to do is understand that you can have a message about fiscally conservative message, like you said, an economic growth message that's very Republican and very conservative. And you can talk about things like school choice and mask mandates and other things about individual freedom, but do so in a way that's relatable to people, right? I think sometimes we as Republicans, and it ends up on both sides of our party, right? Part wants to go too far. Some doesn't want to go far enough. We have to find that middle ground where you can, as I learned when I was young in politics, someone quoted to me, politics is about addition, not subtraction. We have to add people to our cause. Again, in you look at from 2017 to 2021, we lost by 13 points in 17. We lost by 3 in 21. We picked up a lot of legislative seats in 21. We did add this year. We didn't add enough to win the governor's race, but we added. This year, we need to build on that. How do we build on that? And I think part of it is being conservative, not being apologetic about that, being pro-freedom, being pro-people, pro-parents, pro-business owner. And I know you see this in your own backyard. We as Republicans have a unique opportunity right now to reach out to Latino, Hispanic voters who are looking for an alternative to the Democratic Party in a big way. We have to reach into the African-American community more. We just have to do it. The numbers say if we decided we're not going to do that, we're going to lose. So I think part of it's how you preach that message, how you talk about that message to these constituencies. Certain folks want to be talked to a different way. You can go to a Republican event or a conservative rally and throw red meat out the door all day long.
Sure.
That might not work in suburban Monmouth County. It might not work in parts of suburban Union County. So how do we talk to those voters by saying, here are ideas. We're not trying to be scary. We're not trying to be frightening. We're for freedom. We're for lower taxes. We're for you. We're for empowering you. The other side is for controlling you. But make that argument in a way that doesn't repel people. And I think that's the problem that I think we face sometimes, is that we get to the point where we push some people away when we need to be pulling people in.
Chris, great points there. And I just want to piggyback on one of them where it talks about messaging. And listen, I examined this all throughout last year on various podcasts that I host, this show as well, where, again, and I don't want to take a shot at Bob Hugin, he is the state chair, but I would argue that the NJGOP has some work to do this year. I think that when it comes to messaging, like you mentioned, listen, Hispanics like myself, people of color, look at their pockets. People look at times culture war issues. And for whatever reason, I don't think that the NJGOP does a good enough job in that, where, listen, again, I'm not auditioning to be an operative. Listen, believe me, I'm very happy being an academic during the day and a journalist at night. Okay, so I'm happy. I'm not looking for any jobs here. But what concerns me is that I think the NJGOP doesn't do a good enough job in emphasizing or having more outreach. Case in point, I'm a member of the statewide Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of Hispanic-owned businesses that were killed during this pandemic, that were just handcuffed, suffocated by Governor Murphy and by Democrats who, again, have majorities in both chambers of the legislature, and didn't voice their opinions enough, or didn't go with these businesses to really make much more noise. I would argue that Hispanic outreach, listen, this might bother some people, Chris, across the state, but this is the truth. And the census told us this. New Jersey, just like the United States, is becoming browner. More people like me, other brown people, it's becoming browner. It's as simple as that. I'm not trying to play the race card. I'm not trying to play identity politics. I'm the last one that ever talks about this stuff. But these are the facts. These are the numbers. Okay. And I'm all about stats and data. Again, I'm an academic, so I'm about that. I would argue that Hispanic outreach has to be at the top of the list in 2022 for Republicans, because that's how you're going to win over undecided voters or Hispanic voters that sometimes are a little turned off by Republicans or some of the rhetoric, but they have to look across the aisle and say, Democrats are going to spend us into oblivion. Democrats are campaigning on these cultural war issues, this woke nonsense that, quite frankly, for Hispanic people, for the most part, are pretty conservative. Yes. But you have to tap into that well. I would argue the NJGOP doesn't do a good enough job. Hispanic outreach has to be the top of the list, Chris. Am I wrong?
No, listen, I think it's very important constituency for the NJGOP and Republican legislators and county officials and everyone else, right? I'll defend, and I think Bob would be the first to tell you that the party needs to do better and do more. To give him a little bit of a defense in that. He came in last year after Jack won the primary in June, right into a campaign, really was deferential to the Cheddarelli campaign in a lot of ways. That's kind of what the custom is. Had a very small staff. Tom Szymanski's a terrific young guy who's from Monmouth County there, and some others who are on board. I think Bob wants to definitely be someone who understands. One, he understands that the state and the country is getting more brown, more black, and we have to reach out to these voters. We have to grow, like I said, addition, not subtraction. And I think that'll be something now that he's got his full year to do that. It's going to be much more of a focus where it's not necessarily all about the Cheddarelli campaign or state legislative campaigns. It's about building the Republican Party in New Jersey. So I think you'll be pleased with what you see. I will tell you that last year, his efforts to help get money directly into some of these legislative races down in District 2 and 8 and 11 was consequential, was the difference maker in some of the cases of helping these people get across the line. So I think all of us as Republicans, and I know I wouldn't speak for Bob, but I'll speak for myself. I mean, I think we all know anyone who's been involved in campaigns, the right side of the party, the middle, whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter. We all need to figure out how to reach out and message better, to embrace different constituencies, and to be unconventional. The one thing that we used to talk about a lot in Jack's campaign is we're not going to win conventional. I mean, the conventional campaigns in the previous 4 years had resulted in double-digit losses every single time. How do we get away from that, right? Let's be more unconventional. I think the party needs to continue to pick that up. And I'm with you. I think the Hispanic voter, the Latino voter, culturally conservative, small business owner, religious, all kinds of things. If you think about it, check the boxes of the Republican Party. We need to be there, but we need to put the time in. And one thing that we talked about internally with Jack's campaign, and I know that, and I believe the state party will pick up, is the one thing about these communities that you can't do is you can't show up on election day or show up 2 months before or show up 3 months before. You should show up, but it's got to be a commitment over the long course of time. It's got to be a commitment of years to show that this is not just a transactional relationship. Hey, we want your vote and we're going to forget about you. The party needs to, both in terms of who we elect, who we nominate, needs to look that way, right? We need to look like New Jersey. I think the staff that we bring into our campaigns needs to demonstrate that. So I think in a lot of ways, it's got to be a full-on commitment from the party, from the local parties to the county parties to the state party to every candidate that runs for office has to understand that, this is what we have to do. We have to commit ourselves now. And I'm hopeful and I'm confident just because I know Bob and I know Tom and the team that they're building there. That's what they want to do. And I believe they'll do it. And I think I'll certainly pass on our conversation here to them. And I think you'd be pleased. I think we can move in the right direction. I think there's an awareness of it. But 100%, you got to do better. There's no two ways about it.
Chris, well said there. Folks, it's 6:40 here on the East Coast, and we'll be wrapping up here shortly with Republican strategist Chris Russell here on Real Talk Now in partnership with Jersey First. Chris, we'll get back to midterm elections in a moment, but listen, your life as an operative, again, as a strategist, as I mentioned with Dave Perano, obviously across the aisle, obviously his own strategist in his own right. As I tell my students sometimes when they ask me about politics and jobs and what's glamorous and what's not, it's easy to sort of fall in love with the glamour aspects about being a consultant, right? An operative, right? It's a sexy title, right? We see it on, next to people that are contributing on panels, whether it's on Fox News or Newsmax, or even people that, all 8 people that watch CNN and all 7 people that watch MSNBC. I mean, obviously, it's a sexy title, yes, Republican and or Democratic strategist or operative. But you know what? I would venture to guess that it's not as glamorous as it's made out to be. It's long hours. It's a lot of coffee, maybe sugar-free Red Bulls, 5-hour energy drinks, whatever it is. It's a lot of work. It's not your normal 9 to 5. Take us through a little bit to A, what drew you to this line of work, and B, let's be honest, let's sort of separate fact from fiction. How demanding is this?
It is demanding, but I love it because it gets me up in the morning, and every day is different and every day is new. And so, my dad told me when I was graduating college, I went to Temple University in Philadelphia. He said, whatever you do, make sure you love what you do because it's going to be a big part of your life. And if you don't love what you do, you're going to be a miserable SOB. And kind of that was a lesson for me at the time. I'm like, what do you mean, Dad? I just want to make money. I don't care about being happy. And it was now I look back and think like, he was right. There's a lot of wisdom in that. And so I got my start in 1994. I was still in college. I just happened to intern for the Chuck High tie-in for U.S. Senate campaign. I'm dating myself in 1994. And I traveled the state with the candidate as an intern, just doing whatever they told me to do. And I tell people I got bit by the bug, right? I got bit by the bug. It's energizing. It's exciting. No day is the same. I had friends of mine who were, sitting in the cubicle in New York City or Jersey City. God forbid I would do that. I'd drive myself crazy. So I got out. I started managing campaigns from the ground up. I didn't kind of come in this from the high level. I worked my way up. And again, the hours stink. As certainly at the beginning, the pay is terrible. And as you continue to grow, you see some opportunities to build a nice career and to build a business, which I'm proud that I've been able to do both here in New Jersey and out of state. But yeah, there are sacrifices. I mean, one, whoever said, victory as 1,000 fathers and defeat as an orphan. That's true, right? If you win a campaign, everyone won it. If you lose a campaign, you lost it. I'm a baseball fan. Sounds like you are too at the Mets. I liken it to Mariano Rivera, right? I mean, now he didn't blow many saves, but when he did, he wanted the ball back the next day, right? Give me the ball again in the 9th inning. You have to be that way. You got to shake off, every loss and every win, every campaign I take personally. So it does wear on you. You win, it's the highest of highs. You lose, it's the lowest of lows. There's really no in between. But my wife and I have 2 daughters, 14 and 11. They can attest. I'm rolling in last year at 3, 4 in the morning, leaving the house at 7 in the morning to get back to the office. Not every day, but a lot of days, right? And so you sacrifice a lot of things along the way. It's a grueling job. It's certainly, if we were paid hourly, you'd be way under the minimum wage. But I think it's worth it. To me, it's worth it to see good people get elected. It's worth it to have Republican ideals and conservative ideals advanced. And really, I've always prided myself on just trying to elect good people to office. I've worked with people who would be considered very conservative, some who'd be considered a moderate or even a rhino, as they say, right? The old dirty word. But
Sure.
The bottom line is, I try to think good people first and who can make a positive difference in the state. And yeah, there are sacrifices around that. But again, I wouldn't do it if the benefits didn't outweigh the sacrifice. And when I mean benefits, I don't really mean financial. I mean, it's going back to what my dad said. It gets me going. It gets my juices flowing. I still love it. I still love the campaign. I love the fight. I love trying to outthink the other guy and out hustle them. And I've met a lot of through that, met a lot of Democratic consultants in the state who, are built the same way and usually get along with them, right? Not because we don't try to kill each other,
Sure.
figuratively, right, in the campaign, but ultimately, I think we're kind of cut from the same cloth. So usually people like that kind of tend to get along. And to me, it's what makes campaigns fun and it makes it rewarding.
Listen, Chris, I can tell that you're hardworking, obviously, and you're committed, and you have to be for this line of work. It's not a 9-to-5 job. It's something that requires a lot of hours, years of your life, obviously, right? I think it gets us a lot grayer sooner than we would like. Whether it's in journalism, whether it's in working as an operative, it's demanding without question. I got to ask you something real quick, because you mentioned you went to Temple. So you grew up in Jackson. You went to Temple. Are you an Eagles fan by any chance? I got to ask you.
I am not. I am a Jets fan. So I thank my dad for the good advice. Also thank him for the crappy football team. Right. I've been a Jets fan for my whole life. So I'm a bit of an eclectic on sports. I'm a Temple Owl through and through on the college scene, but I'm a Jets fan and I'm a Yankees fan. So the Yankees part has been good to me. The Jets part, not so good to me. Mm-hmm. But certainly not an Eagles fan. I love my South Jersey friends and my Philly friends that I went to college with, but that's one fan I will not be, as an Eagles fan.
Yeah, no, there's no way. I listen. I try to go every year to the Cowboy Eagle game. I feel I need a tetanus shot when I leave that building and that city.
Man. You guys are tough. I love Philly. So you can't get me down on Philly because of I bleed cherry and white with Temple. But yeah, not an Eagles fan.
Oh, well, that's good to hear, Chris. Chris, we're just about to wrap up here shortly, but getting back to the midterms real quick, we look at certainly very competitive races, very winnable races, again, in Central and South Jersey, as you alluded to.
And I think Gottheimer, too. Don't sleep on the Gottheimer race. I think he's vulnerable. He's got a lot of money, and I think that papers over his vulnerabilities. But, again, the guy we're working for, I like him a lot, but Gottheimer is vulnerable in this kind of environment. There's no doubt about it.
Oh, absolutely. I'm with you, especially in Bergen County is a weird county because you have a little bit of those progressive suburban house moms with nothing to do and other than, drink cappuccinos all day and spend their husband's money sometimes out there in Bergen County. But, again, it could be a problem for someone like Gottheimer, like you just mentioned. When we look at, again, sort of the statewide map, and I know you talked about redistricting and obviously the disservice that Republicans were dealt with redistricting overall, it kind of leads us back to voting. And we know that in 2020, vote by mail was a considerable topic of debate, to some extent last year as well. When it comes to voting by mail, I think as we're coming out of this pandemic, the idea of being able to vote in person, I think is as prime as ever. We understand that, listen, at times either absentee balloting has existed. We know that vote by mail has come under a lot of scrutiny. Is there a way to sort of combat this where, again, there are people who are still very skeptical about vote by mail? There's a lot of potential for chicanery there. I'm not trying to sound like a conspiracy theorist or trying to sound someone's calling me a Trumper. No, I'm just a person that understands. Listen, one of the books I've assigned in my courses, Chris, over the years has been The Soprano State. For anyone that's ever read that book,
Yep.
you know exactly what it's about. And I tell my students consistently, because I teach in the social sciences, it's like, yeah, New Jersey has a certain reputation for a reason. And sometimes when you hear about vote by mail and some of the possible chicanery that can exist, is this fixable, or is this just something we're going to have to learn to live with when it comes to elections now for the foreseeable future?
Well, listen, I mean, vote by mail is not going anywhere. So, and if you look at the last year's results, I mean, if you break it down, about 77% of people voted in person on election day last year. I'm sorry, 70% of people voted in person on election day last year in New Jersey. About 22% voted by mail, and about 8% voted early in person. Right. So Jack Chiarelli won the election day vote handily by double digits. We lost the early in-person voting, which I think our party absolutely has to encourage our people who have trepidation about voting by mail. You can vote early. You can vote early at the polls. It's not election day, so it's not that traditional feel that you may like, or that kind of that behavior of people like going to the polls on election day. But vote early in person. Go on a machine and vote just like you would on Tuesday, the first Tuesday in November. On vote by mail, we lost by almost 50 points, right? And what my thing is, I don't really care how Republicans vote. They just have to vote. And we had about 65% Republican turnout last year. Democrats had about 55%. So, their turnout was down and ours was up comparatively to recent off-year elections. But if Republicans don't get their head around mail, that's okay if they don't want to vote by mail, but then vote at the polls. I think you're going to see the Republicans continue to try and push mail to our base, because we're just trying to make it easier for them to cast their ballots. Democrats are doing it. And frankly, if you look at 2020, when we had an all mail-in election, Republican turnout was sky high in 2020. Donald Trump got 1.9 million votes in New Jersey. So there are people willing to do it. Now they're forced to do it at the point of a gun in some ways, right? With Phil Murphy saying you have to do it this way or you can't vote, which we could argue right now was, if not illegal, certainly egregious in other ways, that you force people to do that when the rest of the country is voting the other way. But I think for Republicans, we got to get over ourselves on not participating that way, because we have just some kind of mental block. And if your choice is, and this is as a Republican, right, we should be about choice. If you don't want to vote by mail, don't. If you don't want to vote in person early, don't. But then you got to vote on election day, and vice versa, right? So my big push is, let's encourage our non-voters, which is about a couple 100,000, 400,000 voters who don't participate in most of these elections outside of presidential years. We've got to encourage these folks to come out and vote. And we should give them all the options, right? Give them the vote by mail option, educate them and explain to them why their ballot is safe and why it will be counted. Also encourage early voting and encourage them to vote typically. And I think also on a policy side, we'll never get it passed here, but I think Republicans should be unafraid to speak about things like voter ID and purging the voter rolls. I mean, they're about, and it's a little known subject, but there are about 500,000 voters on the voter rolls in New Jersey who are inactive and may not even exist anymore, right? If you look at Phil Murphy's 2020 campaign, it got only covered by the New Jersey Globe. I'll give David Wildstein credit. I don't think anyone else covered it. And if they did, I missed it. Phil Murphy didn't send ballots to about 450,000 voters in New Jersey who were on the rolls, because he knew, just like everyone else knew, they were inactive voters, and it would have only been an embarrassment to see 450,000 potentially returned, ballots coming back to the state. There's already enough problems with it without that. So I think Republicans should lean into voter integrity. I don't think we should get caught up in conspiracy theories about stolen elections. I don't think that's helpful to us. I think it hurts us in many ways. I think it dissuades our base and makes them think they can't make a difference. We should be preaching the opposite. You can make a difference. You have to vote. You have to come out. And there's more runway for us this year to do that. And if we turn out, this year, I would say statewide, if 7 out of 10 Republicans vote this year, we're going to win a lot of seats on the congressional level.
No, that's right. Absolutely.
And we have to do it. And we have to kind of get our heads around that and understanding that we're not in control right now. So we can't change the rules. So we got to play by these rules right now, hold their feet to the fire and hold the Democrats accountable and make sure these elections are fair. But Republicans have to vote. The worst thing we can do is dissuade them from voting.
Absolutely. Turnout is essential. Chris, real quick before I let you go, I know you mentioned you were working with the Healy campaign. Are there other Republican candidates you're working on House races this year as well?
Yes. Nick DeGregorio in the 5th District against Gottheimer. He's a Marine Corps major, multiple combat tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, a Bergen County kid. who was 16 when the towers got hit, and he talks pretty eloquently about when he heard the fighter jet scrambling overhead when he was in high school, and he knew that day that he wanted to enlist. And his parents asked him to go to college. He did, and as soon as he got out of college, he enlisted, and he ended up serving the country in Iraq and Afghanistan. To me, that's a perfect contrast, right, to Josh Gottheimer, a career insider, a Clinton acolyte, to use Donald Trump's terminology, a swamp creature, right?
Yeah.
Nick DiGregorio, while Josh Gottheimer was writing speeches for the Clintons and making money in D.C., Nick DiGregorio was fighting for our country overseas. I think it's a great contrast, and we're looking forward to making it.
Chris, again, I'm happy to have him on, as well as any other candidates you're representing, because God knows that, if we wait for sort of the mainstream media in New Jersey, like if we wait for David Cruz, Uncle Dave with, NJTV to do something, or Maxi Pizarro with Insider NJ, or some of the others, we'll be waiting forever. So, again, I'm happy to have those candidates on to give them a voice and to sort of talk about issues, because, again, in a midterm election like this where, listen, if there's anything that can be done to neutralize this president who, obviously he wouldn't be watching this show. It's past his bedtime, obviously. But other Democrats as well. Listen, I'm happy to have them on and talk about issues and policy, because now more than ever, we have to sort of clarify one side of the aisle from the other, where one is just toxic along economic lines, social lines, cultural lines, and the other one obviously has better fiscal ideas, but they have to communicate them better. That's probably the most
100%.
succinct way that I can describe the way this midterm election is going to shape up to be.
We have to be relatable to people. We have to be authentic. Relatability is something I think is missed all too often in politics. How do you relate to people on their level? It's not their job to figure you out. It's your job as a campaign or a candidate to figure them out. And I think that's a often missed lesson. But listen, I'm happy to share with the people I'm working for, and I think you do a great service here, Fernando. This has been fun.
Thank you.
And I'd love to do it again with you. And I, thank you for all you do.
I appreciate that, Chris. And again, listen, I'll certainly talk to you off the air. And I'm not sure how it's looking right now, but come March Madness, depending on bubble teams or Selection Sunday, but if there's a Temple Rutgers first round matchup, we gotta have a little wager, my man. What's up?
I would love that wager. Listen, I went to school during the John Chaney era for any college basketball, and so the getting was good when I was in college, and right out of college, we went to a couple regional finals, the Elite Eights. We've struggled the past few years, but it makes me feel old now. One of our head coach last couple of years knew is a guy named Aaron McKee, who was a classmate of mine at Temple when I went there. Programs on the rebound, we're at 13-7 right now, and third place in our conference. So I'm not sure we're going to get to the tournament this year, but we're starting 4 freshmen and a sophomore, and I feel pretty good about where the program's heading.
Listen, you never know. You get hot right now at the end of February, early March. Anything can happen. But if there's a Scarlet Knight Owl first round matchup in some region,
it's down for now. You take it to the bank.
Wager.
No doubt about it. Take it to the bank.
But Chris, I want to thank you for your time. You're a gentleman. I appreciate you coming on here tonight and really breaking down what's going to happen in 2022. And I look forward to having you back on here on Real Talk, as well as some of your candidates. Look forward to that. I'll give you the last word.
No, listen, I like I said, just to Republicans around the state watching you and who are following, I think we need a lot more. We have in common a lot more things than we have not in common. And I think we need to figure out kind of the Reagan rule of your 80% friend isn't your 20% enemy, right? And we have to kind of bring ourselves together, unite. That means, not liking maybe everything about the candidate in your district or your town or your county or your wherever, but finding the best candidate who can win and getting behind them and working really hard to then reach out and grow our party. To your point, the Black and brown communities, places we've lost in the past couple of years in the suburbs, we have to grow and reach out to other people. In New Jersey, in particular, we are outnumbered by 1.1 million people. We cannot win unless we grow and reach out. And I'd encourage all Republicans, wherever they may fall in this 21 counties, 566 towns, to do that.
Well, Chris, I'll leave it right there. I appreciate your time. Folks, he is renowned political operative and Republican strategist Chris Russell here. Join us on Real Talk with Fernando Uribe. Chris, I'll talk to you again soon here on Jersey First.
Thanks, Fernando. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Folks, I got to tell you, a great episode today with Chris Russell. And certainly I think that he helped us really understand what awaits Republicans in this election cycle and what really is going to have to be done work-wise, rolling up your sleeves, going door to door, doing better outreach. I think he really gave us a good breakdown of what Republicans need to do in some districts that, quite frankly, are winnable. As I alluded to, obviously up here in Hudson County, in the 8th Congressional District, solid Democratic area. I have no doubts that Robert Menendez Jr. will win this district hands down. But other districts, not so much. Democrats can be a little bit vulnerable. And certainly, especially as he mentioned, up in Bergen County with Josh Gottheimer, and even down in Central and South Jersey, respectively, this is a chance for, common sense fiscal conservatives to win House seats, to sort of put a little bit of a handcuff on this ridiculous administration in Washington that doesn't understand economics, that doesn't understand biology, obviously, right, with some of their woke nonsense that they're conveying as far as policy. But this is where, again, the right and the GOP and conservatives and libertarians alike can sort of mobilize and sort of join together to get some of these bad incumbents out here in the Garden State. And again, we got a lot of months here, folks, to sort of dissect it, and I'll be happy to do that moving forward here on Jersey First. Well, that's our show for this week, ladies and gentlemen. Again, I want to thank Republican strategist Chris Russell for joining us here. And as I talked about at the beginning of the broadcast, Real Talk with Fernando Uribe is proud to now be in partnership with Jersey First. And you can check out all of their excellent content by going to www.jerseyfirst.org. Certainly great content there with Elizabeth Nader and her excellent program, the Nader Narrative. You definitely want to check that program out at the Jersey First website, also on their YouTube page. Certainly this episode will be available shortly there as well. And folks, listen, I just want to say thank you for tuning in here. It's a new chapter in sort of the lifespan of Real Talk with Fernando Uribe. And as I talked about last week, I mean, listen, the idea behind this show, when it first started to where it is today, I mean, the idea really behind it is to be a disruption for the media establishment here in New Jersey. And I'm happy to be the disruptor because there's just too much bad journalism out in the state of New Jersey. I've talked about it extensively, right? Whether it's Uncle Dave, David Cruz with NJTV. Listen, I mean, he can, put out a good interview every now and then. As a matter of fact, I'll give him his due. Did a great interview with Robert Menendez Jr. Recently on one of his shows that he does on NJTV and NJ Spotlight. And that's fine. But I mean, folks, a clock is also right twice a day too. So I'm not really we're not really setting the bar very high here with him or others, right? Like Maxi Pizarro with Insider NJ, a guy that could just put you to sleep when he goes on the air and does an interview. But again, folks, my job here is to bring you guests that you don't normally see on other media sites, and to talk about the issues that matter to you, regular, everyday, working New Jerseyans that care about how to put food on the table, how to get to work, back home to, from work, how to fill up your gas tank, whether or not what fiscal policies we should be pushing for. These are the topics, ladies and gentlemen, that I will continue to discuss here every single week on Real Talk with Fernando Uribe, because, ladies and gentlemen, no one else is. So I'm sorry about that. To, be able to examine these issues in a way that makes sense. So I'm happy to do that. Again, I cannot say how proud I am to join Jersey First. And again, a thank you to the hierarchy there, to the leadership for their belief in this program, for their belief in my abilities, and more importantly, for just their belief in me and what I know I can contribute to Jersey First. So again, I'm ecstatic about it. Certainly, if you check me out on social media, you know that I'll continue raving about my new partnership with Jersey First. You can see it there, obviously behind me on the Real Talk logo. I'm proud to have it there. And again, ladies and gentlemen, I'll continue discussing and breaking down what's going on in New Jersey politics. And I'll argue no one's going to do it better than this program each and every week live on Monday nights at 6 p.m. Eastern time via Jersey First. And that's our show for this week, folks. Again, make sure you check out Jersey First on their website, www.jerseyfirst.org. That's Jersey, the number one, ST, Untitled.org. Make sure you like them on Facebook. Of course, follow them on both Instagram and Twitter. Also, check them out on YouTube. Share the YouTube links and the channel. Make sure you subscribe on the button there. And again, I appreciate you tuning in here. And always remember, ladies and gentlemen, if it's unbiased, unfiltered, and unafraid, it's always real talk right here on Jersey First. I am New Jersey's premier award-winning journalist, top 100 Latino, via the Latino Spirit Online magazine for 2020, 2021, and now in 2022, and also the sworn enemy of all the latte liberals, social justice clowns, toxic progressives, climate hysterics, and all the woke fools throughout the Garden State. Yes, it's me, Fernando Uribe, standing up against all of them every week here on Jersey First. Folks, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you here next Monday night live at 6 p.m. for Real Talk with Fernando Uribe. Have a great one, folks. Again, enjoy the Super Bowl this Sunday, and I'll see you next Monday night on Valentine's Day. It'll be quite the episode. You definitely don't want to miss it. I'll see you next week, folks, here on Jersey First.